Well, this is pretty fun. I get to meet Taylor Waters, who is quite an accomplished human. She is in Cleveland, but she teaches animal law and policy at the Vermont Law and Graduate School. But really, she's also this international person who speaks at the Oxford Center for Animal Ethics. So, Taylor, we're going to talk about infantilizing animals and why that happens, why it's maybe not a great thing. But you're wearing a couple of different hats, and that's interesting. Explain how you came to be this person who is the farm animal advocacy staff attorney at the Vermont Law and Graduate School, which is nothing to do with the Oxford Center for Animal Ethics, which you're also part of, and you're in Cleveland.
This
So
is true.
you're in many places at once. You're actually the idea that people can't be in two places at once, you're in three.
I manage it pretty consistently. I got here with a single-minded focus to become an animal attorney, and it I went to law school for it, and I ended up in some really interesting opportunities that helped get me to this amazing institution. And I was actually speaking with the Oxford Center for Animal Ethics summer school before I landed at Vermont. And actually, I think I met Delcy Winders, who is the director for the Animal Law and Policy Institute at the Oxford Center for Animal Ethics. So it's this great brainchild of people who are involved in animal ethics scholarship.
So, in fact, the field of law has a number of people like you who chose to go into law on behalf of animals and then teach other law students how they too could be aware of it, incorporate it into their own future careers or current careers. It's quite interesting because it's niche, but you guys are very out there with it. I've interviewed a few other professors, one from Georgia, where animal law, animal welfare law, ethics law is what gets you up in the morning.
It does. And it's always a fun question being asked, what is animal law? Because if anybody's not familiar with it, it's the first question they ask. And it's the great thing about teaching students about animal law because they're all so passionate. Everyone's here and in this tiny little world because they're actively choosing to be. And it's some of the most optimistic, impassioned, smart people that I've ever met.
Nice. Nice. That's a great bunch of people to surround yourself with and to further inspire. This issue of infantilizing is what caught my interest when you reached out or somebody that's associated with you reached out and said, "Hey, would you like to talk about the infantilization of pets?" And sure, I would, because it's really interesting. Some of the topics about how powerful cute can be, but the
Yeah.
theory of baby schema. Now, I think some of us are aware, but maybe not all, that there are a number of breeds of dogs who already look like they have a human baby face. They're round and smushy face, not a long snout, which isn't human-like, and big eyes. So we're talking pugs, we're talking Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, other spaniel faces that are brachycephalic or flat, and that appeals to people. So you're a legal ethicist. I'm guessing that you don't think it's great on behalf of animals who already as a breed had perhaps at the very minimum breathing issues to make them even more human baby faced in order to get more humans to want to own them and coddle them. Talk a little about those breeds in particular with the baby faces.
Yeah. So it was an interesting fact recently that the kind of French Bulldogs took over Labradors as one of the most popular dogs in
Yes.
America, which is unheard of. Labradors were up there for many decades. And it was part of this big popularity behind the snub noses and the big eyes and breathing heavily, lethargic, really big ears. And they stay small forever. They stay really small.
Right.
And people are picking them and buying them on purpose for these traits. So, compared to when we see people picking other kinds of dogs for other reasons, obviously I'm a proponent of rescuing, but I understand that many people still purchase
Sure.
dogs. It's not necessarily for aesthetics right off the bat. Sometimes it is, but often you'll hear these other reasons that they want someone to watch the house or they want a dog that's good with their family. Sometimes you get working dogs mixed in there. And with these very specific dog breeds, pugs are huge up on that list. Yorkshire Terriers, Cavalier King Charles, as you mentioned, are just monster, very short faces, very droopy eyes. And it's because of this baby aesthetic. And so it dips into online digital interaction as well, because when we saw these animals take the win for popularity, it was at the same time of an explosion of videos on the internet. So on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And as people are watching these videos, they're saying, oh, that's so cute. They're liking, they're engaging. And the next step is logically, how do I get one? I want them. They're so cute. And that's when you cross into this weird ethical framework.
You're saying they're not picking it consciously because it looks like a human baby face. But in fact, unconsciously, that is what's drawing them to these faces and to the dressing up of them, to the taking of them to places where their pictures get taken, like people used to do with human babies. And
Yeah.
now I have the statistic that at least in New York City, there are more dogs than children, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a factual thing. But I think that the health problems of these breeds, Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, it's dire consequences to their breeding to give them this big, round baby face that actually doesn't quite fit the brain of a healthy, normal cavy. So a lot of these dogs, unbeknownst to many of the people choosing them, or Cavalier King Charles Spaniels crosses, which come from puppy mills.
Yep.
So the people getting Cavapoos are buying puppy mill dogs. They cannot deny that fact. And it's disturbing because even somebody that I was working with professionally had a Cavapoo, and I said, I'm glad you're really happy. Could you give me the name of where you got the dog? And they gave me the name of a puppy mill,
Oh,
an
yeah.
internet puppy mill in Missouri or Pennsylvania. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm glad you're happy, but this breed, Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, are suffering from epilepsy and seizures and terrible agonizing pain that their brain doesn't fit their skull, and they have to have surgery to relieve this pain, which would not be there if popular demand had not caused this. And don't you know, this person, a lawyer, and I think a very decent person, I mentioned lawyer just in passing, he happens to be, he went right out, a wife and two young children, and bought another one from the same
Yeah.
puppy mill because they wanted to, because they really liked the first one. So,
Yeah.
what about the ethics of this? The fact that even when, and I don't, I try to tread lightly, but everyone who follows the show knows I have a heavy step. When I think that something is unethical, immoral, unkind, I want you to know you're doing it because
Yeah.
once you know, you're on the hook. You're doing it on
Exactly.
purpose.
You can't unknow.
That's right. There's no such thing as ignorance is bliss. What about these issues of the ethics of continuing to propagate, perpetuate these baby-faced animals without even consciously understanding it's the cuteness you want? You want the eternal baby.
So that's actually one of the reasons why this is my favorite talk to give. And when I did give it most recently at the Oxford Animal Ethics Summer School this past summer, I always have to tread lightly when I start the conversation, starting with, hey, what silly names do you have for your pet? Because it gets people to talk a little bit, the audience feels engaged, because you are making some ethical accusations that people take really seriously. People view their pets very much as family. I've got a dog, she's family.
Right.
And so when you frame it, I always probe into why people want particular dogs. We see this a lot
Okay.
with the doodle mixes. So
Yes.
say, hey, why do you want a doodle? And they'll say something about it being hypoallergenic or other things.
Goofy reason that they're not even, they have no dog allergies. It's really hard
No.
to be allergic to dogs. Cats, it comes quite naturally to those who are
Yes.
allergy prone. You're not really allergic to dogs. People take
No.
a bath.
And once you probe into it a little bit, they'll say, I like how they look or they're a popular dog. Then I find it interrogating in a fun way to get people to wonder why is it they do want this specific breed. So my mother, I love her very much. She had a dog who was a small dog. He was a Doberman Pinscher mix with a Chihuahua, I believe. My mother loved Chihuahuas. Do you remember the Yokero Taco Bell commercials from a million years ago? She
Chihuahuas still remain very popular.
They are. And she loved this. So when she was thinking about getting a new dog recently, her old dog had passed away quite a while ago. She wanted to get a Chihuahua. And I said, Mom, why? She's like, I really like the last one, and this one I'm gonna get like a real Chihuahua. And I said, what about a Chihuahua do you really like? She goes, I got this like really big head on this really little body. She
Yeah.
set it up perfectly. I never get someone to set this conversation. And so I said, like, comes to some health issues, especially with a hyper-specific purebred like a Chihuahua. They've been bred for a really long time. There's a lot of hyper-specific health issues. Are you sure that's the path you want to go down? Are you going to get a purebred? Where are you going to get it from? I work in Ohio. Before I was at the Vermont Law Graduate School, I was just a private run-of-the-mill animal
Right.
attorney. And I had a lot of cases against these Amish puppy mill breeders and brokers. And one thing came up repeatedly, and it's always illuminating to people when they find out. Most of the dogs that we helped with the consumer protection law in Ohio were small, adorable puppies that were corgis. They were pugs. And so sometimes letting people know that this is a highly trafficked thing that is trafficked based on the vanity, the appearances of owning a particular dog or how it makes us feel about ourselves,
Right.
there is such a broader consideration that people start thinking about. So if you can get the information in, the questions and conversations that come from that can be really beautiful.
That's a nice way of putting it. It can be really beautiful. Now, when you're in Oxford, you're actually in England. So do you find that your British students or others in the audience have a different way of interacting with you and a different way of expressing themselves vis-a-vis their dogs?
They do. And so that's why I do a lot of interaction when I give this talk in
That's
particular.
nice.
It is, because I always like to hear how people perceive their dogs. And there was one woman who was there this summer, and she was there a prior summer when I gave a similar but more difficult talk on the same-ish subject, but it was more on the digital exhibitionism. And she mentioned the first time I gave it, it made her cry. And so she'd hoped I wasn't going to make her cry this time. I told her, absolutely not. This is a feel-good thing. We're exploring the ethics of
Right,
owning babies,
right,
basically.
right.
And every time I give this talk, people find me afterwards to talk about their dogs, to talk about choices that they've made. You'll just be having lunch and they'll appear to suddenly start discussing their puppy and why their puppy is different. And so this never happens if I'm getting a normal lawyer style talk. This
No.
happens because people are thinking about it after we
Yeah,
give it. So I think it makes it through in a way that wouldn't happen as easily in the States, certainly, but it's also a very friendly atmosphere. Everyone's there because they're thinking about animal ethics. So it's such
right.
a good self-selected population.
It is a good way of putting it. I have a goddaughter in England, and she and her sister, who followed in her footsteps, got Chiweenies. Why, if you want a Chihuahua, you then cross it with a wiener dog, which is a dachshund, who have enormous physical problems. They've made them the breeders, the breed, the AKC, or in England, the UKC, have bred these dogs longer and longer with a spine
Yeah,
that doesn't work in real life, but their faces are really cute and quite childlike. And they come in three varieties: smooth, wire haired, and of long hair. Yeah,
yeah,
long haired. And people love them. But then you take dogs that have physical and or behavioral issues. Chihuahuas are aggressive.
yeah.
Anyone will tell you that. Call it assertive. Gee, it's a big dog in a little body. No, it's not. They bite people. They do. It's
They
what
do.
they do. People think, oh, pit bulls are so dangerous. Not all of them, and not really, but Chihuahuas go after people.
They do.
There's their ankles, or you're holding one, and then someone leans over to kiss you. My niece in Canada, I leaned over to kiss her, and the dog snapped at me. I'm like, whoa, the dog's trapped in someone's arms like a baby, going back to infantilization.
Yeah,
Rarely do these dogs, it seems, use their legs in social situations. So they're held at eye level with humans who think, oh, they're so cute. They look so cute because they look like maybe a human baby or child being held. Dog can't escape. A human face comes at them, which is aggressive in dog language. You come at them, you don't like
yeah,
shake their hand first, so to speak, and they snap. So
yeah.
there you have Chiweenies. And you know what's happened when my goddaughter had her first baby and then her second, she couldn't have the dog around because
Oh
it's
no.
snappish. So who gets to get it? My oldest best friend and her husband, who are now have inherited two Chiweenies who are difficult. There's lowercase d. It's people don't understand the consequences. What if you didn't have a family member who could safely take the dog? Another woman at Havanese, some of these other breeds that are lovely toy type breeds. The black and tan spaniel, there's a spaniel that looks a lot like a Cavalier King Charles spaniel. I may be saying the wrong thing, but they're beautiful little English spaniels. The Havanese growled if the grandchildren came near it.
Yeah.
So that was permitted because nobody had interfered with its natural instinct. to not be lovey-dovey. Human babies don't usually bite and snap, and they don't have teeth. So,
No.
not even dangerous if they do, right? They gum you. Of course, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
it's cute if anything.
Babies don't bite. But I think this idea of the theory of baby schema, I was in my vet's office the other day and thinking about this intense popularity of French Bulldogs that happened within 2 or 3 years, which means
Yeah.
they're being churned out. Forget puppy mills, it's almost an assembly line. And the dogs have tons of physical problems. Oh my God, digestive, skin in particular, stubborn to train. So I'm looking at
Yeah.
the pedigree dog food, very faded. It's Vermont, right? So there's an old chart on the wall. Pedigree, I guess it's still around, but that used to be the brand. And there had a big, extra big golden retriever and a big, extra big Labrador. French Bulldogs are not on there. They're not
No.
even one of the popular breeds from 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. They don't even exist. And now they've pushed everything else out of the way because they're cute little chunky monkeys. They're really cute looking.
That's it.
I don't know how their moms and dads are suffering ethically in order to churn out these babies. How many babies are discarded because they come out deformed in some way, which happens when you're mass breeding and inbreeding
Yeah.
multiple times over and over.
And just the volume of them that end up back in shelters. So I had a number of clients who would experience regret after surrendering their dog to a shelter because they couldn't care for the medical expenses. We see that in these really overbred dogs with really specific physical problems. You mentioned another thing that's really interesting and I think important to kind of italicize or underline that there's often a mobility restriction that happens here that you don't see in
Right.
other dogs. It's either they're
Yes.
carrying them all the time, they might go in purses, they might be in outfits, they could be in strollers,
Yes.
particularly in New York City. Every time I go visit family, it's dogs and strollers everywhere.
Wow.
And so, what is the cost to the dog? Because most dogs that you meet to run around, they like to play, they like to stretch their legs, they like to experience these very normal dog behaviors. And if you have a really small, hyper infantilized dog, it can't. And it could be a lethargic problem because it can't get proper air. It could be a leg problem. Wiener dogs, dachshunds, they can't
Yeah.
run and jump very well. They'll break their backs. They might have short, stubby little legs on purpose. So we're breeding in animals that are physically and fundamentally incapable of living the life of normal to their species. And there's something really tragic there.
And the people who have infantilized them in this way and swaddled them and strollered them and then held them in their arms. The woman who had the Havanese, which I actually helped her find, it was a 1 year old dog from a responsible breeder who was not going to breed this dog because he had a good breeder x-rays their heart and looks at their blood and looks at their joints. And this dog didn't pass those health tests. So he became a pet dog. Within a year, no, the dog was a year old, she was carrying him in a sling like a Central American person, or what we used to see Vietnamese women in rice paddies, slung to her front. And that's how the dog went around the world. And she'd
Yeah,
take him into stores and into restaurants, and he'd be in a sling on her front. This was the dog who growled. No wonder. He had no idea what it was to be a dog, clueless. So
absolutely.
carrying this dog around and jokingly saying, "Oh, I feel like I gave birth to him." It's not a good thing to feel. It's not good for the dog. Even the funniest little dog is still a dog, and running
Yeah,
and sniffing and marking with P mail is part of who you are, and
that's it.
sniffing the world around you. And this infantilization, which is made to seem cute with little costumes and outfits and strollers,
Yeah,
is it should be a concern. I think the reason we're having this conversation and why you teach this to budding lawyers, all of whom are very committed to animal welfare, is that we need to see it for what it is. I think that's really important. Now,
it
miniature
is.
poodles, turns out, are fairly healthy dogs, and they're
They
just
are.
crossing them with these other breeds. Now, one thing they have is something called a luxating patella. So, a not well bred miniature poodle or even a toy poodle, which are two different sizes technically, their kneecap is not firmly in place where it should be. And these dogs can be screaming in pain with a kneecap that like, literally the kneecap goes out of place and has to have surgery. But for the most part, people, it's not trendy to own a miniature poodle. People say, oh,
No,
they bark too much. Like, what? Dogs that
no,
are well exercised and well trained and have a well-rounded life, they don't bark too much. There's no such thing. Beagles howl because they're bred to be in a pack and chase wabbits. But
that's
other
it.
than that, there's no such thing as, oh, little poodles bark too much, so I'm going to get a cross with something else.
That's it. And I always
Thing
question the fad of behind putting poodles, various sizes, standard poodles, miniature poodles, toy poodles, with any number of other breeds, because it's always a happy add-on that is being specifically bred, not really well looked at for the health of the animals. But people don't actually want poodles in the same way. And I
they
think there's something
don't.
interesting going on there too. Because you're there, the psychology seems to be I'm going to have this dog that I will like aesthetically that will not shed all over my house. That's the basic
Yes,
idea.
yes.
And
And
it's,
continuously growing hair
yeah,
as opposed to shedding. So you still have to have it groomed or do it yourself. It is a curiosity, and I wonder what the Poodle Club of America thinks about this. When poodles in before your time, and maybe when I was an infant or a small child in the 50s, that was the most popular breed. And
oh
in
yeah,
dog shows, they won the most. There were the most entrants, and they fell away from favor because they were, I don't know, was the world oversaturated with them? There was nothing about them that made them unappealing, particularly.
no,
And
but
yet,
they did.
so you think social media has driven the idea that these oodles, these doodles and oodles, have somehow become more something that people wish for more, want more, without
I,
understanding what is it that you're wanting exactly? Because no two golden doodles are the same in
no,
their looks, in their coat, in their temperament, in their intelligence. It's not
that's it.
that you can have a reliable outcome, and yet you're paying an awful lot to have a crossbred dog who might shed. I mean, a
Yeah.
doodle can shed.
You're not guaranteed a particular coat.
That's
And
right.
it's the online presence of these dogs has driven a whole economy of breeding particular traits based on what traits are, for lack of a better phrase, trending.
Yes.
And it's wild because then they end up in shelters because they're not bred well. They'll have social issues, they'll have health issues, and it just feeds this never-ending cycle of animal overpopulation.
So, what is our takeaway message for people? One is dogs are animals and enjoy sharing your life with them, but please don't turn them into babies. Is that
Yeah.
our message?
I think, yeah, question why, if you want a particular kind of dog, particular breed, ask yourself a few questions. Why do I want it? Is this what's best for the dog? Can I give the dog a healthy life if it's a particular breed? And what are the actual reasons why some health issues exist in dogs?
Yeah, you ask yourself that. And then, yeah, but, or the people come up to you after talking and say, yeah, but mine's different. Because mine is like really healthy and happy, and she doesn't have heart problems. It's like they somehow think that they get to be the N of one instead of looking at the big picture. We're all responsible for looking out for each other in some ways, but certainly we look out for children and animals because
That's
they
it.
can't look out for themselves.
No.
So, you're not your brother's keeper, but you are the keeper of the animals who share our world. So you're there teaching animal ethics and law. This is a kind of a very vague issue. Should you be seeking out a baby faced dog, even though it does harm to its parents and some of its siblings may have died a nasty death when they were little, or you're going to have thousands of dollars of bills, which you will with Frenchies,
Oh, yeah.
you can't afford it. So now you're going to do what? These are not real breeders, so they don't like a proper responsible breeder. They're not taking your dog back,
And
which
they're not going to ask questions. They're not going to ask you if you know what the issues are, if you're
right.
prepared to cover them. They're just going to take your money and walk away.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing, particularly in states that have high puppy mill breeders and brokers, there's still going to be an economy for these dogs, unfortunately. And so even if all of the kind of guidance around rescue, don't shop, blah, 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 people will always be able to fundamentally justify their decisions as different or the exception to the rule.
Yes.
And I mentioned my mother earlier, I'll mention my father now. He used to say, nobody's that special. And
That's
so
right.
Even if you think you're making the decision for all the right reasons, you're still perpetuating a really harmful economy that leaves many dogs homeless and dead and just suffering really uncomfortable lives. So I hope that we as humans still have the empathy to translate that message that don't buy someone else's suffering.
Wow, that's a really great note to end on. I must say, don't buy someone else's suffering and don't justify it. And don't you dare say you've rescued a dog. If you have purchased a dog, you have purchased an object because they still, by the law, are an object. You didn't rescue anything.
No,
You did keep an economy going that's full of suffering.
that's
Please
true.
do not say, if I see one more article, oh, such and such movie star or rock star rescued this purebred Weimaraner puppy. Yeah, that's called buying. Anyway, Taylor Waters, you're wonderful. The work you're doing is fascinating, and I hope more people become lawyers because of you, and lawyers doing something that really matters to them and to the world at large and to the dogs and other animals that you're defending and protecting. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.